Hey everybody, welcome back to another breaking is it I don't know if it's breaking if it's like something we knew was coming because they gave us dates for all these things. This is a new little peek at the future of Legion rules from Atomic Mass Games. Um Once again, if you missed our last video, go
Go
watch
watch
it
it.
cuz I got a feeling it'll be more interesting than this one just because the rules they announced on Monday were a lot more confusing and interesting and debatable than these ones. I'm really excited about the one we're going to talk about today, but if you missed out, basically they are teasing a few changes to the Legion rulebooks as we come up to January 16th when they will be releasing the new rulebook, not a new whole set of rules for the game, just a new document that has had some touching up and tweaks and a few new things. And the new thing we're talking about this time is what they in the article call perhaps the biggest change of all in the core rulebook. The core rulebook is what they call that new thing, as opposed to the rules reference guide or the learn to play book. Um, is the pass rule. Legion has a pass rule now, and
Finally.
I am. I think they didn't go far enough.
I hate
I'm
this
Agreed.
rule.
team pass. I'm team. They should have done this when the game came out. I'm very excited about it. I'm team AMG. Good job. Um,
Wow.
I'm team. If
Wait,
your list can't handle my high activation list, your just means your list is bad, and you should find
somehow
a new list to play.
somehow I knew that that would be Leo's position. I already knew that that was Joe's position, but I just had to kind of guess on Leo and with Kurt's the wild card of the group. We just never know what's going to happen with
I'm
Kurt.
on Team
yeah,
Joe
Kurt's
on this
crazy.
one.
Kurt's crazy. Pardon.
that's why we hired you. Keep us on our toes.
No,
um,
I'm on Team Joe on this one. I'm excited for it. I think they could have gone further with it, but
yeah, let me
let's describe it.
Yeah,
Yes,
let's
read
let's
through
ex-
the
let's
do
notes.
tell
explain
us
how the
what
rule
it is.
works.
So during like it's basically showing a snippet of like the on your turn kind of thing. Choose a unit to activate or pass. That's what you do on your turn. We all know how activating unit goes. Passing, a player may pass if they have fewer remaining orders than their opponent. To see how many orders a player has, add together the number of face-up order tokens in their army, the face-up tokens they have on the battlefield, in that player's order pool and on their command cards. So if you've got less face-up tokens and pool tokens, and there's probably like one edge case where they're on your command cards, you can on your turn say pass. If you do, you do nothing, and it's the other guy's turn again. But this is where I think they don't go far enough. It says a player can only pass once per round. So if Leo rolls up with his 15 activation list, which I think you can get in like CIS and Empire if you make a really
Seriously,
weird list.
though, if you need a pass rule to beat a 15 activation list, you should. Because seriously, I think a list with that high activations is probably going to be garbage.
Basically, Leo rolls up with that list, and I've got a super pro 5 act. I don't even know if you can make legally make a 5 activation.
You call
Seven
it
or eight or
super
something.
You
elite.
could do like
On
some.
my
Super elite
turn,
team.
yeah, I say, oh, he's obviously he's got more in his pool and face up than I have. I will pass, and then it's his turn again. And if you're scratching your head wondering why this is a thing, basically, in less extreme examples, let's say Leo has 12 activations and I have 9, and he's sitting on Darth Maul or something. I know he's going to not activate Darth Maul until I've done all of my guys, and then I have no way to respond to him. If I pass, that closes that gap a little bit where he's allowed to act without my response. Um, and I don't. That's basically how I view it, and I think it's not enough to say once per turn. I think you should just be able to keep doing it as long as you have less things because like passing isn't like a super powerful move. It's good, but it's still saying here, why don't you go twice in a row? It's still like good for you. You just don't get to try and cheese it as much by saying I'm going to hold off this guy until you can't do anything about it. They're
Yeah.
yeah, they said a way to balance between keeping activation count a potent advantage, which it always is, even in games with more aggressive pass rules, but not overwhelming. Yeah, Leo, tell me how we're all wrong about this.
I already did. But I will say, as far as them adding a pass rule into the game, which is a thing I've, said many times I don't want. I think this is probably like the best case scenario where it's just one time around. I it honestly, as much as I have said I don't want a pass rule, it being once around, I don't mind so much.
It
I
probably
think
won't have a huge
I
impact.
You
I
know,
think it's gonna impact two things specifically, and everything else will probably not see too much. If you get an activation wiped out in the first couple rounds, it might help you to try and like not be at such a disadvantage so early in the game. But what I think it's going to do a lot for is the Republic squads, particularly squads
with
that use
fire
fire
support,
support,
yeah,
because once you fire support, every time you fire support, you're basically chewing up two of your activations at once. And this, you're almost always going to be in the position to pass with less ready people than your opponent. So it's probably going to help Republic squads kind of stay in the fight longer rather than, oh, I just blew all my fire supports and now they get to do five things and I have nothing left to do.
it's gonna suck.
But
Yeah.
again, with once a round, it's not.
It'll really help the most if you're only one activation behind, because that's
Right.
basically as many as you could do. Um, so like right now, it's kind of like a middle ground between like the two pass rules that we have in other Star Wars games right now. In Imperial Assault, you can do as many as you want, as
Until
long
you're
as you're
even.
behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's like about the maximum you could do. Obviously, you'd never have like unlimited pass. And then on the other end of the spectrum, we have Armada, where you get like possibly one or two per game. It's kind of similar math where it's like the difference in number of activations, but it's only for the total game, not per round. So you get like very, very few passes, which is like,
Oh, so if
that's a game with fewer activations anyways, but still I kind
right.
of felt like that is like way, way not enough because it's like such a small amount of passing.
That would
And,
feel,
you
it
know,
does sound more strategic. Like, let's say if Legion did that and you've got 13
just save it
activations
for a
and I
really
have
big moment.
10, I get 3 passes that I get to use throughout the whole game. And now I have to think, you would still be thinking about when it's the best time to use your one pass for the round, but interesting.
Yeah, I don't know. I think, and again, it's just a different game. They just have less activations total there. So it's just kind of hard to compare. But I do like that this Legion rule is more passing than that, which didn't seem like enough. But I do think you might as well go all the way to the IA style where you can pass whenever you're behind. And like from playing IA,
I
that
remember
is
when
a
they came
nice
out with that
rule.
because it wasn't in skirmish when it started. The game was out for
Yeah.
a year or so, and then they added that, and it was like, this makes such a difference
A really
because
nice difference, but it doesn't
before you,
completely take
yeah,
out the advantage of having more activations because the person
absolutely
with
not.
more activations will always, always have that last activation. You can never take that away by passing because you won't be behind if you have
It
the
just
last
means,
activation.
oh, when by the time you get to your last one, I'll still be there to do something right before you do it, rather than you get to do 4 things in a row to finish out
For
the
sure.
round.
Yeah.
And when they added it to Legion or to Imperial Assault, it reduced the number of activations on sort of like high activation lists were good, but then it made lower activation lists not terrible. Like,
Yeah. I think there was, at least in my perspective, there was always a constant creep of the activations going up and up in Imperial Assault. And I think the pass rule slowed that down some or set it back a little bit. I still think they overall ended up going up over time, but it was nice that it was like less bad to be behind an activation. So I think it did help.
I think
That
even
would
if
be
this
true here too.
Legion one tones it down a little bit to lowering the average activation number people bring, that's still good because that means games will go faster because there's less stuff on the
Yeah.
table. And I always like more high cost things on the table than a lot of cheap things because that's just more interesting to have more mechanics and more cool people rather than lots of little things. But
I think so. I mean, obviously, people, there's different styles of play and stuff. Some people will
Mhm.
like to have higher activations and stuff, but and it's a little different too. Like in Imperial Assault, some of the extra activations you were adding were characters who literally did nothing on their turn, and they were effectively just there to pass by having a character do nothing.
Some
We
people
don't
play
quite
Legion
see
like
that.
that. Some
A
people
little
do.
bit. Like some of the sniper units are cheap, but like at least they're usually taking a shot.
Or the generic officers, some people use them like that. I'll
That's
hand out
true.
an aim, and that's about it. Like, oh, I hope I get them because it's basically going to let me stall some more.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess for me over time, that style of play, I get frustrated when it's like, okay, you have to take these cheap padding units that do nothing. I'm like, well, I would rather be viable to not have to do that. And I mean, it's sort of viable. It's not like they're 100% include, but you know,
Yeah, I remember
I just don't
like
like
a
it as
while
much.
back when I was preaching about the need for a pass mechanic in Legion. People were like, just take R2. Like, well, that's against the point. That's again like, oh, what? So you see there is the need for a pass if you're saying just take a cheap unit so that you can just have a wasted activation. Well, like, why not just have a pass rule so you don't have to like gimmick it that way?
I mean, the lower activation lists in some situations were still viable. Like I think one of the top lists, if not the winner, I don't remember at PAX here a couple weeks ago was like an 8 or 9 activation Blizzard Force list that also had like a 30-point bid.
Oh
Wow.
yeah, I think those. I
But
think also I'm not super versed on it, so don't ask me why. But I'm pretty sure Blizzard Force is like busted.
yeah, well, that's actually I from what I've seen is actually why the reason the person ran it, that particular list, is
Kind
not
of
that they
balanced
wanted to
that
play
out.
Blizzard Force or enjoyed the list they made. They just wanted to point out to everybody that Blizzard Force is kind of busted.
Hmm.
Oh,
Well,
what an honorable! Like I didn't want to win,
Well,
but
it's sort of like
the
it's
pass
sort of like
show.
that guy in Yu-Gi-Oh lore who brought the 5 foot tall deck to the game because he was annoyed with them never instituting a deck size limit in tournament rules. So he brought that a giant deck that he needed 2 other people to help him carry around.
Evan looks very skeptical.
I think I've seen
I
pictures of
I
that.
I think what gets me not even really scratching my head, but it sounds like both the previous article, which if you haven't listened to their conversation on it, you should go back and do that after you finish this one. Uh, that and this article both sort of talk about gimmicky things where players are gaming the rules, gaming the game in order to gain advantages. And I don't want to say that they're catering to, or maybe targeting, it would be a better way of putting it rather than catering to that crowd. But I guess for me is like, is that fun? Is it fun to just skip and not have a turn of interaction? I mean, I understand why we want it to force the opponent to do something and then be able to react off that. And they
I
certainly
mean, well, I think in IA, I remember when I had lower activations and I was trying to decide, it felt to me like a really interesting strategic choice to be like, is it worth passing, or is the guy I'm waiting with, is he gonna die from all these guys going while I'm sitting and passing, or is it a good chance? Should I wait for him to go and then I can move up? It was like usually an interesting balance to try and decide
Yeah, I
whether
was.
should.
And I was gonna say, and the thing to consider, Evan, is if you're running the lower activation list, you're gonna have downtime anyway. It's just a matter of, are you gonna have some of it in the
True.
middle of the round, or are you gonna load it all at the very end of the round when you just say, okay, I'm done now. You, my opponent,
Right.
do 3 activations in a row or something like
That's
that.
always the thing when you have the option to pass is you're like, well, I mean, a lot of times it's best to just do it all right away and not pass because they're about to score that objective, and if you pass, they're just going to go again and do it,
Right.
or they're going to kill your guy. So it just gives you a little bit more flexibility instead of feeling like they're just running around on you and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah, I think
So
the main time it helps is when they're waiting with their best unit so that, all their actions are basically letting you finish your turn, and then they're like, okay, now I can go with everything and run up and kill stuff. So
mhm.
that so there's some situations where it's nice to kind of hold back and be like, okay, you have to go with some of your stuff before I finally move up and let
Yeah,
you kill me, kind of.
where they've got like 5 things, 2 of which are waiting to do the gonna ruin your day thing, and the other 3 are just there to waste time. Well, now you can say, okay, I'm gonna wait until the time wasters are done, and then I'll can at least react to one of the other 2 guys before you
Yeah.
finish.
One thing that I do think is like a good sign about the change too is as much as I think they should go further with it, I think it's a good sign that they found this kind of middle ground. And they speak to that a little bit in the article too. It's less of a big change than if they went full bore on it, right?
Mhm.
There's this kind of they're adding some passing without going extreme on it. And so that gives them a good opportunity to kind of try it out and see how it goes. And depending on what people think about it, they'll be able to say like, "Oh yeah, it's a little too much or it's not quite enough or whatever," and then adjust it from then maybe. And they mentioned in the article at least that they said and it was an arduous road filled with plenty of pitfalls and lessons learned. So, it sounds like something they've been play testing and they've been trying to figure
Yeah,
out the
well, they
right
did say
balance
that in the
of
article
too
that
much.
they play tested this particular rule change more
Mhm.
than any of the other ones.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a good sign that they're trying to be careful with it and find the right balance.
So this idea popped in my head earlier, primarily due to Warcry, where they don't. I don't think there's a literal pass mechanic, but uh, for those that don't know, it's a skirmish-sized Warhammer game, but it has alternating activations. You can have one of your fighters wait as one of their 2 actions. So it's kind of a split activation. So there's a wait token you can put down on the guy. So you can do that as many times as you want, as you feel like, but each time you do it, it chews up an activation. That might be adding a lot more complication to an already complicated game, in my opinion, full of tokens in Legion. But that's where I've seen a wait or a pass used, where you can do it as much as you want, but then you're eating into your action economy to do it. Do you think that's that too complicated for Legion, or just stacking on too much complication when just the one pass per round? Like, okay,
I
that's
mean,
fine
Sounds
as long as
like
you're
it's kind
behind.
of getting into the. I mean, the what you're describing there is sort of similar to like the standby action
yeah,
that the game
True.
already
Yeah.
sort of
has.
already in
Mhm.
the game,
Which is
Um,
except it's
which is another thing I was wondering about, because you can already do that, but you're using up an entire unit's set of actions
yeah, it
to
would
do,
be kind of
right?
interesting if they changed standby to be like, okay, if your standby doesn't trigger at the end of the round, you can do
Mm,
one thing, or something
that would
like
be good
that.
because a
interesting.
standby
Yeah.
is always the most situational action. Like you're only going to use it if you are like completely like hidden and you're absolutely going to ambush someone who runs around a corner because it's way too easy to make someone lose their standby. I don't
Yeah,
know if that's a bad thing because it would be maybe too strong the other way, but the
Yeah. It would
idea of
be
an unspent standby could be
a mini
you can
effect like
discard it
a
to like
speed
move.
1 or something instead of a
Yeah.
full speed, or yeah, something like that would be really interesting. Because you're
Wow,
right,
look
it's
at
kind of
we're
like
onto
an action
something.
that doesn't get used a lot, and that's just like
I
us just
tried to
completely
use it once or
speculating, but
twice, and then I was just like, nah, I'm not going to do
There,
this again. I'm actually
there's a
going to do
hand.
something.
I mean, there are situations where it's like absolutely the best thing you can do, and you do it, and your opponent's like, "Oh, god damn it!" There's because you're like, "Oh," like especially if there's like a melee guy, and you've got a set of guys with big old guns do a standby. Now, well, is he used to want to come over here and tangle? But a lot of times it's just, oh, well, I'll just have this guy shoot off your standby before I have to worry about it.
Yeah, I mean,
I
it
love
works.
better
doing
It
like
tends to
ground
work best
vehicles,
if you
but
have like a guy out of line of sight, so that
right.
way, like someone has to run around a corner to get to you, and then you can trigger your standby. And but yeah,
Hmm.
and like you said, it's very situational. Um,
the range limit too.
yeah,
Um,
and I know,
Right.
but
I
yeah,
know, and like that's because that's the thing you end up doing sometimes, where you pull the wrong order token, and you're like, well, shit, I guess a standby is maybe the best action I can do here because I I didn't want to go with this guy yet. Whereas a pass could help eliminate that, but I could see, I mean, changing the way standby works, like we said here, could do some of those same things.
That was my
but that
one big thought. That's all I
yeah,
got on the subject.
yeah. I mean, that's really just all obviously not even speculation, just kind of navel gazing on it. But yeah,
Yeah,
it's interesting to think about what other things they maybe could have done instead of
Mhm.
passing, or in addition to passing, or something. Probably a lot of different ways you could do it.
I mean, there's plenty of games of Magic the Gathering where I'm just like, oh, pass, pass, draw, pass, draw, pass. Like, I understand. Like, I don't want to do anything just yet, but yeah, no.
yeah. If we want to speculate, we could speculate. We still got 2 more rules updates ahead.
Yeah.
I wonder, honestly, the one thing, well, I had already been speculating about the pass because there was stuff about passing in the X-Wing
Scenario
terrain
with the
kit. Yeah, the
yeah,
crashed
Mhm.
X-Wing
crash
terrain.
X-wing.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, there was some stuff in that scenario about how only red player can pass, but that doesn't explain what passing is anywhere in there. So I was like, oh shit, they're gonna be adding pass to the game, aren't they? Um,
That's interesting though,
kick
because that means
and
this was
tackle.
lined up far enough in advance. Like if you think about how long the development times are, they
uh-huh.
kind of were already planning to edit. It's kind of interesting.
Um,
But
and
yeah, what would be the other rules they're
I
thinking about
I
changing? Like
I
what would be the
guess
most
I wouldn't.
complicated?
I'm wondering if we're going to see them do like they did with X-Wing and make it so if you do a point bid, that gives those points to your opponent as victory points.
Oh, well, with X-wing or with Legion, doing things around victory points is so hard because every
Yeah,
scenario,
I mean
like,
not
oh, this
necessarily
scenario has
victory
like a
points,
yeah,
but or it would count as points destroyed for when things come down to
Oh.
like when you're tied on victory
if
points and need to
I could
go
see
for
that.
points destroyed.
all of the real hardcore people are gonna go real mad at me if they got rid of like the incentive to bid in Legion, I would be so happy. It's trickier in Legion, I think, because it's tied into the red player blue player thing, which is a big thing. But it's so big. Like the other one of my lists, I'm like I'm gonna make the biggest bid I ever did because I know that Chris always has obscene bids and his lists always play a certain way and they always like these certain objectives. So I'm gonna make a big bid and I'm gonna make all my objectives specifically ones that are gonna fuck with his guys. And it worked out
It
great.
worked.
Yeah, it worked. Well, I think I probably still lost, but it was really close for once.
Yeah.
But it was I I find bidding to just be this weird extra like meta game that I know a lot of people like. It's kind of
Yeah, I mean,
strange. And if
I
they
think if you're seeing bids around, like 5, maybe 10 points, You know,
That seems pretty normal.
that's reasonable. But you know, like here, like I said, when you can have, um, you know, like you said, that Blizzard Force that took like a 30-point bid, that's ridiculous. It was the same thing like way back when we still had the original key positions, was it?
Yeah,
Was that
yeah,
the one
where it
where
basically was an auto win for blue player.
yeah. And so there was people doing,
Mhm.
you know, like 30, 40. I think I even heard of like people doing 50-point bids just to make
Wow.
sure they could play key positions um and guarantee a win pretty
Hmm.
much.
Yeah, it's definitely a thing. I don't like bidding, but I'm not sure if you could do it away in a way that's going to satisfy people. Well, I know what they did with Legion or X-Wing didn't satisfy people, but I don't know. I'd be
I I don't know.
curious to see
I
some
if
attempt
they
at it.
I don't have a problem with them, saying, if you bid this many points, that counts towards, you know, points destroyed for your opponent. I think that would be a reasonable
Makes sense,
thing.
I think.
But now I guess we'd be now what are we going to talk about when this does turn out to be a rule? We'd be like, yeah, we already talked about that last video.
Yeah, then we can just hop on, tell people to go watch the other one, and then call it a night.
um, yeah, I guess I think that kind of concludes my thoughts about uh passing. You know,
Yeah, this one is not. It's very straightforward as far as how it's implemented. I think there were a
Mhm.
lot of questions and people going, "What about this? What about that?" with the line of sight rules. I don't think there's any questions about how this is. If there's going to be any weird interactions,
yeah,
it's very
I
clear.
think. Well, I've seen some people wonder about how is it going to interact with this certain command card or that certain command
Oh,
card. But
sure.
I think that's going to be, that might be covered once we see like the full rule book. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm
There,
not too worried about little
there's
edge cases like that right now.
exactly
I
there's
think it's
bound to
either.
be
Yeah,
an FAQ. It's gonna be a literally a frequently asked question of how does this core rule interact with this corner case exception card. It's like, here's what we intended, here's how it reads, here's the rule. Because they're
Mhm.
doing that a lot with Warhammer FAQs. They actually have designer commentaries on it where they will go and break down, like, this is our intention, this is how we want you to interpret it, and do it that way. That's how we want you to interpret the rule.
that's good. I like that. I feel like there's a lot of rules that are always like up for interpretation when they just come out and say, "Hey, that's that."
Yeah, people get really fiddly on the English. Well, there's a comma instead of a period. So that means,
Yep.
Like
yeah.
the Bible.
Yeah.
If the Lord comes out and says, "This is what it means," clears it up.
But was it an Oxford comma?
Please, in the comments, tell us if, because I think everyone is going to be a Joe or a Leo about this issue. They're going to hate it, think it didn't need to exist, or they're going to love it and say they should have done more. And they pleasing nobody by doing this once per round thing. um, tell us what you think about this new rule. Are you excited for it? Are you indifferent to it, or are you going to loathe it and write to your senator about it? Let us know. And if you didn't, go check
Nationalized
out
Legion.
go check out our last video about the line of sight rules where we break down that stuff and look forward to the next one, which is what, on Monday?
Yep, next Monday,
Next
the
Monday we'll be
Next
back.
19th,
Monday.
19th is it? Yeah.
Yeah, we'll be back to talk about the next thing they talk about. Bye bye.